Hello and welcome back to our video mini-series about manners and etiquette in 12th century England. My name is Philip, and in this episode we're going to be discussing table manners and etiquette regarding food. It probably comes as no surprise that behaviour at the table was monitored very closely in medieval society. I think we can probably all imagine the archetypal medieval feast. A celebration, to be sure, but also a time to really reinforce that social hierarchy. Now, feasts in the Norman period may have been a bit less elaborate or pompous as later centuries, but they're still no less important in the minds of the people who attended, and as such, there were strict social protocols in place. I think it's fair to say almost every reenactment event includes food of some sort. It's just a given nowadays. And the number of wonderful displays around historical cooking just show how interested we are in food. And while the preparation of food is the subject of multiple excellent showpieces, the actual consumption of food is often overlooked. In fact, our modern attitude to eating is probably the most consistently anachronistic thing I have seen at reenactment events of any period. Now, this isn't a massive problem. I'm not trying to upset anyone or point the finger, anything like that. It makes a lot of sense. For most people, eating is eating. You don't really have to think about it. And it won't ruin someone's enjoyment of a show if the food eating that they see in front of them is exactly how they would expect it to be, like in the modern day. However, if we are trying to accurately recreate life in the 12th century in England, there is no reason not to really engage with table manners. So that's what we're going to be doing in this episode. I'm going to talk about informal meals as well as formal dining. But before we get onto any of that, there is something I really need to get out of the way. Hygiene. Hygiene. Hygiene is paramount in the medieval mindset. It is the golden principle that runs through all that we see done here at the table. It's the foundation upon which table etiquette is built, and it makes a lot of sense. We often have a preconceived idea that because people in the past didn't understand germs or complex medicine, that they were just filthy muck urchins who are covered in dirt and had no real attention paid to hygiene. But this couldn't be farther from the truth. Imagine if you're living in a world in which medicine might just not work. Any illness could be a death sentence. You don't know about bacteria or germs. All you know is that if you get sick, you could just die. If your child gets ill, whatever medicine is available at the time might just straight up not work, and that's it. Infant mortality is a common occurrence. Dysentery, fever, stomach ulcers, even toothache, all could be a death sentence. If you're living in a world where any illness could leave you in a coffin, you are going to do everything you can to minimize that risk. Often, modern reenactors view shows as an excuse to rough it for a bit, like a fun camping trip, secure in the knowledge that they can have a good wash and pick up some tablets at the pharmacy if they get a bit unwell. But if you're really wanting to portray a person of the medieval period accurately, really inhabit that mindset, you're going to need to be a lot more hygiene conscious. With all that being said, the first rule of 12th century table manners should come as no surprise. Wash your hands. Wash your hands before you eat, wash your hands after you eat. This was done publicly. And over time, a kind of ceremony evolved around this, where decorative basins might be brought to each guest in order, so they could show themselves cleaning. But the rule stands whether you were the King of England or just some random serf. You would always start and end each meal with a good wash of the hands. Now, the second most important rule is napkins. Now, these could be undyed scrap of linen, or there might be something specially made. But every meal was accompanied with napkins. In fact, Daniel of Beccles even said that you could have a meal without a table, but you could never have a meal without napkins. And these were used to clean your mouth before taking a drink, to clean your fingers, and also to wipe the cup of a drink before giving it to someone else. Again, ceremony kind of evolved around this over time, but it was seen as very, very rude and kind of disgusting to offer someone a cup that you hadn't obviously been cleaning beforehand. Now, with these ideas in mind, there are other rules that are going to come up that are to do with hygiene, but we'll get to those as we go along. Another thing to mention is that every meal would begin with a prayer. The modern practice of saying grace actually has its roots in this. Now, this could be a specific prayer of thanks, or just a common prayer, like the Paternoster that everyone would know. Right, on to mealtime etiquette itself, and I'm going to begin with some basic things that you would see at informal meals. So these are the kind of things you would expect to see pretty much at all layers of the social strata in 12th century England, and in pretty much every circumstance. They're also some of the easiest things to introduce as reenactors. Essentially, if you're having prepared food with other people, these are the things that would be expected of you. First, after washing your hands and praying, you would get your food. Now, everyone should have their own knife for eating with, as metal was quite expensive, but dishes or spoons would be provided by the host. If you're making up a dish or a plate for yourself, you shouldn't grab at communal food. Definitely don't tear chunks off with your fingers. This is what your knife is for. In fact, your fingers shouldn't touch any food unless it is going straight into your mouth. Now, bread should be sliced unless it was being served fresh from the oven, still hot, which was a rare treat. Meat should be sliced as well. But before slicing anything, make sure your knife is clean. Now, this could be done by cleaning it with your napkin or by wiping it on a slice of bread. Now, if there are lots of you sharing a drinking vessel, make sure to clean your mouth beforehand and to clean the vessel afterwards, just like I said earlier. It reflects really badly on you if you leave a dirty cup behind. Now, just like today, farting, burping, or talking with your mouth full are all considered very rude. And equally, you shouldn't be sat there picking at your nails, picking your teeth, picking your nose, or picking fleas off of your body. At the end of the meal, make sure to wash your hands again, and don't wander off with the spoon that has been lent to you. This is a bit of a sticking point for Daniel of Beccles, and I imagine if you ask any cook who has prepared food for a group, they'll be able to tell you exactly why. He says, "The spoon that you used to eat with does not become your property." So, with the basics of informal dining out of the way, how do formal meals differ? Well, there are a number of ways based upon quality and quantity. That is to say, specific etiquette regarding meals, assuming there will be a high number of very high-ranking people in attendance. The Urbanus Magnus was written for an audience of upwardly mobile, middle-class people, and so it gives a lot of very detailed instructions as to how formal dinners were carried out, so as to not out yourself as ill-mannered. Now, a lot of these rules, developed over time, become very, very important, to the point that, even in later centuries, there are people forming grudges and feuds and fighting duels over who sat where. Reported by Ottokar von Steiermark in 1298. There then arose a great quarrel. The Archbishop of Cologne asserted that by ancient custom it was the Archbishop of Cologne who was to eat on the right-hand side of the king whenever a court day was held in Germany. The Archbishop of Mainz protested and took the seat by force. Cologne left the hall in a rage and challenged him to a duel. Yeah, so with that in mind, let's get into it. Well, like all things Norman, feasts were a way to celebrate and reinforce social hierarchy, and so guests were arranged in order of social standing. The person of highest rank would sit in the centre of the top table. The next highest rank would sit to their right, the next to their left, and then radiating outwards from there. This extended to other tables in the hall as well, with the highest ranking person being sat at the end closest to the top table. It's important to note that the highest ranking person isn't necessarily the host. If a lord hosted someone of higher social rank, then they would give up their place at the centre of the top table. All were seated splendidly, but not equally. Now, to help with this, the host's steward would be responsible for figuring out seating and directing guests where to sit using a short staff or rod. This eventually became the symbol of their office. Now, the interesting thing about this sort of physical manifestation of social hierarchy is that it was fluid. If someone arrived later, there was an unexpected guest, people would have to change their seating arrangements in order to accommodate them. You were always expected to offer your seat to someone of higher rank, and this could result in everyone having to sort of move down the bench in order to accommodate them. Now, this seat offering extended to court as well, so offering a person your place was seen as a clear act of deference. Once everyone is seated properly and has washed their hands, it was time for the feast to begin. Now, that person of highest social rank would lead proceedings. If there were no members of the church present, it fell to them to say the prayer. They may then drink, at which point everyone else would be allowed to drink. Now, Daniel of Beccles warns of a potential faux pas here, saying that when a servant offers you a drink, you should just accept it. Don't offer it back to them. The exception, of course, is if the servant is female. Then you can invite her to drink first. Whatever the case, you mustn't drain your cup, but rather wait for food to be served. Now, the napkin, that other very important part of medieval dining, could be placed across the left wrist so that it was easy to reach during the meal. Food came in multiple courses and was served on large platters. These platters were placed between two people, yourself and your dining partner. You would each also have a small personal plate or dish. Now, when the food arrived, you couldn't just dig in. See, the person leading the feast may want to say a few words first, and you could only eat after they had already started. But as soon as they took their first bite, it was time for you to eat. So the Urbanus Magnus provides a lot of guidelines when it comes to this part of the meal. And since a lot of them don't really require much explanation, I'm just going to kind of list them as a sort of almost step-by-step guide to formal medieval dining. First, don't just take food from the platter with your fingers. Cut pieces with your knife. If you are the first to cut a slice, always offer the first slice to your dining partner. Move the sliced food to your personal dish with your knife. Only take food from the platter and never from your partner's dish, and do not take a lot of food at once. Most food will come with an accompanying sauce, which will be served in a small condiments dish. Never dip your food into the sauce directly, but rather spoon some sauce onto your personal dish. Once the food is in your dish, you may eat with your fingers. Hold it daintily between your forefinger and thumb. Make sure the pieces you put into your mouth are small. You shouldn't have to tear at them with your teeth. Now, don't drink with food in your mouth or talk with your mouth full. Therefore, ensure you never take so much food into your mouth at once that you cannot respond promptly if someone speaks to you. There's nothing wrong with leaving uneaten food on your plate. In fact, it became fashionable, as you didn't want to be accused of gluttony. A 13th century didactic poem says that immoderation in eating and drinking often damages a person in body and soul, in reputation and property. So, with that in mind, don't move food from your bowl back to the platter. If soup is served, do not blow on it to cool it, and do not slurp it or spill it on yourself. Remember, there will be multiple courses. Do not gorge yourself on just one course, but partake of each equally. Between and during the courses, you are expected to hold pleasant conversation with your dining partner. Sit up straight whilst at the table, and keep your elbows off of the table unless it belongs to you. Be quiet whilst you are being spoken to. When you do speak, be polite and not so loud that you disturb anyone else. Don't spit or cough. Daniel of Beccles suggests that if you feel the need to cough, simply defeat the cough. If you have to burp, look up at the ceiling to do so. Men, it is respectful to take your hat off whilst at the dinner table. Remember that. Finally, at the end of a formal meal, there may be another prayer, especially if it is a religious feast day. Do not leave the table until the person who is leading the feast has already left. See, they essentially decide when the meal begins and ends. Also, do not urinate in the hall, unless, again, the hall belongs to you. Yeah, so the host can pee in their own hall if they want to. So, quite a lot of etiquette for a formal meal, as you might have expected. But overall, none of the rules are too outlandish, or even that difficult to introduce. The formality of a meal like this, with lots of people engaging in the roleplay, could actually make for a really fun and really interesting set piece. Well, with all that being said, that really sort of wraps up this video series. I do hope you've enjoyed it and learned a lot. If you'd like to see more videos like this in future, do let me know. But for now, I think I'll just leave you with probably the single most important advice from the Urbanus Magnus. No matter what you do, never, ever forget that spoons you use for eating do not become your property. Farewell.